we do have. We can follow up, get email addresses, and we can distribute any questions that are asked after the meeting back for that email list.
Will do.
My apologies. We tried to make this as easily accessible to residents as possible. I don't take ownership or endorsement of that content, but here we are, and I'm going to go back into the presentation. Boyana, could I ask you to re-invite Mr. Sidlowski by email from the Surfside Association? Don't see him on the list, and he was there originally. One moment, I'm going to go back to my opening place in the presentation. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to start off by providing everyone with an overview of where the project takes place. It is an expansion of our existing southwest ramp to the southwest in line with the existing ramp footprint. It contains a noise berm with PFAS-containing soil encapsulation, stormwater, and noise monitoring improvements. So we have a style of presentation prepared for you today that provides you with first the justification for the project and concludes with the plans. Since the justification drives the technical specs, that's where we're choosing to start. Frankly, we think that's where there's more community interest in the community facing the environmental items rather than the technical plans. If you're only here for the technical drawings, check back in 30 minutes. That's where we'll get to them in that point in the presentation. So for background, I am before you as a town employee, and the airport is an enterprise fund of the town of Nantucket. What that means is that we have a separate user-funded budget from the town. We are governed by a 5-member airport commission, which is appointed.
Are you wanting to watch this meeting?
Which is appointed by the Nantucket Select Board. The Airport Commission has responsibility for setting strategic priorities and governance policies for the airport. And these policies include being held accountable to the FAA. So Nantucket Memorial Airport is what's known as a federally obligated airport, in that we accept federal funding for operating and maintaining the airport, and we need to do so to federal standards. The FAA doesn't run the airport, but they are the primary regulator and funding agent. The FAA itself is a safety and operationally driven agency. In every aspect of our operation, we are held accountable to safety standards. These standards can be both precise, such as the number of times a marking can be repainted, as well as performance driven. We have to provide an airfield free of hazardous wildlife species, but we get to decide how to do it. We are also held accountable to be open and available on a non-discriminatory basis to our users. And then the airport is also what's known as the fixed base operator at the airport, or the FBO. Most airports have multiple FBOs on the airfield that do things like sell fuel, marshal general aviation aircraft into their ramp position, provide luggage carts, laboratory services, and other aviation business items. Here at Nantucket, the airport and airport staff are the single FBO, and we're an in-house operation. Safety is our priority, but the FBO is also the business engine of the airport and community. The point with this information is that the project we are discussing today is our best way to meet the safety deficiencies that exist today at the airport, and that is also compatible with our mission and with FAA requirements. So For ongoing background, the project planning begins with identifying and implementing our environmental permitting process. We had substantial environmental permitting requirements. I'm going to be quick and fairly high level. Cameron Woods, our environmental coordinator, will spend more time in a few slides discussing the additional mitigation and community efforts. So for our environmental permitting process, this project was part of a package of 5-year capital improvements or major items we were expecting to take on over the next 5-year timeframe. This project triggered 2 major and parallel review processes. The National Environmental Policy, abbreviated by NEPA, many people have heard that acronym before, and the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, MEPA, with an F. The review culminated on the federal side with the NEPA environmental assessment with a finding of no significant impact, which was issued on May 12th, 2021. And then on the state side with the NEPA environmental impact report with certificate issued February 5th, 2021. And I know that's a lot of acronym, a lot of regulatory speak. The items many people tend to be more familiar with are those that come under the MEPA certificate. And that's the Massachusetts Endangered Species Program Conservation and Management Permit, which was issued on April 13th of 2022. The Nantucket Conservation Commission order and approval and order of conditions from February 2nd, 2022. And the United States Fish and Wildlife Service Northern Long-Eared Bat Section 7 consultation process, which was filed on September 8th, 2023. So airports participate in ongoing and targeted capital development program. The goal is to define a realistic and achievable set of priorities to address safety deficiencies and deliver an efficient operation. The picture on the upper left is from 1998 during the South Ramp expansion. The current South Ramp, as it shows, is being expanded in progress work in that red box. Presumably in the mid-1990s, the airport identified this project as necessary to address its needs. I was in high school in Ohio at this time. I don't really have any more firsthand knowledge with this project. The second photo on the left, or excerpt on the left, is from our 2007 CIP, our 2007 Capital Improvement Plan. A decade after the 1998 expansion, the airport had identified that a further ramp expansion was needed. So in 2007, they made a formal request to the FAA for $5.6 million for a project that would occur in 2012. And how did that go for us? The airport would identify this project every year for 16 years on their capital improvement program to the FAA, always 3 to 4 years out. And every year the FAA would push this project out. That's not the FAA's fault. That's just the state of the backlog of federal infrastructure funding at airports and in the country. There has been cost escalation associated with this project. This cost escalation has been driven by design changes, need for a deeper pavement box. As aircraft have gotten heavier, the pavement needed to support that aircraft has gotten heavier, has gotten deeper. As there's more pavement, there's more cost. Industry and island-specific cost escalation has also occurred. We also now carry PFAS costs that we didn't before. And then there's also elective mitigation. This project could be cheaper, but the airport has taken on additional items that, while not required, we think are important compacts for the community. So I have this slide to further explain the costs with the project. We had an opportunity to take advantage of leveraging several grants at the state, regional, and national level. I wanted to emphasize that this is not a town general fund or taxpayer project cost. The property taxes do not go up or do not go towards paying any part of this cost. I'm going to round to even numbers as I explain this. But the overall project cost is $41 million, and it's made up of two sections, grant funded and airport funded. The grant funded portion accounts for $34 million. The largest single pool is from FAA discretionary funding at $29 million. Bill AIG, that's an acronym for the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Airport Infrastructure Grant, that accounts for $3 million. FAA entitlement funding is $600,000, and Mass DOT Aeronautics is funding just under $2 million. The airport funded amount is just under $7 million. The grant ineligible portion, or the portion we're taking on to take on these community and environmentally focused projects, it's just under $5 million. And then our typical sponsor share, which is 5%, is just under $2 million. This grant ineligible portion is predominantly related to noise and emissions work. So transitioning into the purpose and needs section, I've already discussed the institutional and planning background for this project. I'd like to move on and discuss the specific purpose and need for justifying why this is the appropriate project. And we have various market sectors at Nantucket, and you've probably seen them, and you can identify them by the plane that's operating. Air taxis, currently Cape Air, but in the past it was also the shuttle and Island Air. This activity has declined by a factor of 10. Large air carriers such as Delta, JetBlue, United, American, these have doubled at the airport. Airport Southwest, or the transient GA, transient general aviation operations on the Southwest ramp, have seen a moderate overall increase. And if you just look at this figure, you may think that this is an aircraft volume issue and that our need for more space is due to more people and more planes when it's already busy. But it's not, and this is the item that I wanted to address first off in the purpose and needs section. Current Southwest ramp traffic during peak months of July and August has grown very little, and this is shown by the yellow line. The airport Southwest ramp is not really busier because of more aircraft, and our planning for this project is not based off of a future growth trajectory. It's a project we've been trying to put into place for 16 or 17 years. And it's based on what's already here. Most of the annual operations increase is caused by off-peak or off-season traffic. This is really due to what some consider the success of the Nantucket shoulder season and the year-round utilization of second homes. And this is the blue line, and this is the point of my slide. We are busier in our shoulder months. So the need for more ramp space is being driven by accommodating the same amount of aircraft. They're just larger. And that's what I wanted to explain by walking through this slide. The item I've identified here says ADG3. ADG3 is an acronym for Aircraft Design Group. It's an official category within the FAA to describe plane size. Specifically, it's for aircraft with a wingspan of 79 feet to just under 118 feet. And this is the area that's seen the highest rate of growth going back since 2004, and even more so recently. If you're an aviation buff, the aircraft in this design group are items such as the Falcon 7X, the Gulfstream 5, 6, and 7 line, the Global Express, and there are a few others. And they're not only replacing the mid-sized Aircraft Design Group 2 aircraft, but larger Design Group 3 aircraft are replacing the smaller end of the Design Group 3 range. But that's the big point that I have, is that the growth, the largest aircraft are driving the need. Aircraft are getting larger. They're getting larger quickly. Another way I like to show that information is with two examples of our common fleet evolution, top and bottom. for this top portion. The Gulfstream 5 is being replaced by the Gulfstream 7. The picture on the upper right is a Gulfstream 7. Both of these are aircraft design group 3 aircraft, but the G7 is 9 feet wider and 14 feet longer. The box it occupies on the ramp is then 26% larger. Area increases geometrically with a linear increase in one aircraft dimension. And that's what I'm showing by the highlighted 26% increase in area. A small increase to length, small increase to width is a much larger increase to the footprint of the aircraft. And it's not just large aircraft where we see this. The bottom right photo is a Pilatus PC-12, and it's been replacing an aircraft everyone is familiar with, which is the Cessna 402. And here the change is even more pronounced. The aircraft replacement here is a doubling of space requirement for a single aircraft to 3,000 square feet from 1,500 square feet. And this is a trend that we see across all aircraft classes. So the lack of space that we're experiencing is a safety and operational deficiency. This is a satellite picture taken that just happened to capture a peak summer weekend parking configuration. I don't recall exactly when, but I know it was prior to COVID. I'm going to walk through the areas that we see in numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Number 1 is our current grass tie-down area for single and light twins. This area is within the footprint of the current ramp expansion area. I think there are 25 aircraft parked here on the grass. This is becoming less and less preferred by pilots. I've listened to radio conversations. Pilots are assigned this parking area. Many times it violates their lease or rental agreement with the flight school. Grass is not as even as pavement. Taxiing aircraft bump into each other. That's damage, and that's a liability that occurs. Area number 2, we call that our runway 6 run-up. Parking aircraft here is not expressly disallowed by the FAA, but it is an operational liability. The purpose of this area is for an aircraft to pull over and sit and wait 2 or 3 minutes until it has its FAA air traffic control departure release. We also have aircraft that operate here that are hard to get to, hard to observe. We don't know how long they're running for. Number 3, this is the big deal for the airport and for the FAA. We closed runway 1533, our crosswind runway, for parking. This is a major FAA safety concern. They consider that a dual-use pavement for parking and for a runway, and that is a safety standard violation. It also limits the utility of our system by FAA aircraft traffic control and is a major operational liability. I think this picture shows 10 aircraft parked at the time the photo was taken. And then number 4 is the maxed out parking on our existing ramp. There's a lack of alley space between aircraft for taxiing. We've had increased ramp rash accidents, and we are not parking the FAA guidelines, which is a 15 to 20 foot wingtip clearance. In many positions, we are interlacing or doing close-in parking of overlapping wingtips. So we believe this project represents the best available improvement over the status quo. Aircraft are already operating in or adjacent to the expansion area in spots 1 and 2. We also have inadequate aircraft separation, which is leading to conflicts. And what I mean by that is, from my previous slides, I showed what happens when we have a longer aircraft. Longer aircraft take up more space into this alleyways. And then as aircraft taxi, which are wider, we have very narrow, very constricting alleyways. This requires longer taxi times, airport personnel towing aircraft, and increased ramp rash accidents, whether it's wingtip to wingtip, wingtip to tail, or wingtip to nose cone. So I also deeply believe that the ramp expansion improves the status quo in regards to efficiency, noise, and associated emissions. This is one situation I happen to photograph from our operations building. I'm going to walk through what we have here. Coming in off of Charlie onto the ramp is a Global Express, and taxiing out from the front row on the left is a Cessna Citation CJ3. This Global Express entering the ramp can't make the left-hand turn between this Global Express and this business jet. Meanwhile, this CJ3 can't exit the ramp and depart. You can see that our staff are here trying to figure out how to unlock this situation. Both of these aircraft were running their engines on the ramp for something like 5 to 10 minutes while staff figured this out, which they eventually did. But it's illustrative of congestion-related noise and emissions that are worse than they could be because of a congested ramp leading to conflicts. My point is that more noise, a crowded and inefficient ramp generates more noise and emissions than if this plane would have just come into the ramp and shut down, then if this ramp would have taxied out on its own. I also am supportive of this project as it enables airport ownership of noise issues, or increased airport ownership of noise issues. With this project, we're bringing forward a noise burn. We're enhancing our ramp noise monitoring. We will be performing emissions modeling. We will be undertaking enhanced ramp management. And we're considering other initiatives under study. Quiet hours, preferred operator program, enhanced noise abatement being one of those. Preston Harriman and Cameron Woods are going to speak in more detail on those items. And I'd like to hand the presentation over to Preston Harriman at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Carberg, and wanted to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. Today I'll be discussing our ramp management and monitoring plan for the new South Apron expansion. As you can see from the photos on the slide, during our peak time, it poses challenges for our operation and line service personnel. Coordinating this traffic flow and assigning parking positions to pilots takes a high level of skill, attention to detail to ensure the safe and efficient movement of aircraft. Next slide, please. As Mr. Carberg showed earlier, you showed this slide for being a snapshot of where the actual new apron is going to be. You can move on to the next slide. That'll zoom us in a little bit closer to show more of the configuration of the current ramp. The area shaded in blue, I may refer to as our main apron, the existing ramp as it sits right now. And the new south expansion is shaded in yellow. Next slide, please. This is a more up-close drawing of the new South Apron, its parking positions, the new connecting taxiway Lima, and the noise berm, which is circled in the green oval. Wanted to just give a quick snapshot of the ramp itself. Mr. Lazen will go in further details on design, phasing, and construction later in the presentation. Next, please. So for our ramp management and monitoring plan, we've identified 5 intended uses for the new apron. We've got hot, warm, cold, VIP, and mixed operations. Each one of these having its own specific restrictions and limitations. I'll dive into these individually over the next few slides. First off, we have what we call our hot operations, which is going to be our least restrictive of all the 5. We'll have aircraft power into parking position, but they will be towed out of position for taxiing and takeoff. Runtime for APUs will be monitored and restrictions will apply. I wanted to provide a quick explanation of what an actual APU is and what it does. So an APU is an auxiliary power unit, which is a small jet engine, typically in the tail section of the aircraft, that would power avionics, heating, cooling, light, and other necessary equipment for the crew members to conduct pre-flight checks and inspections without having to run the engines. So we've identified a few dates and anticipated times where hot operations would be running. Those include Memorial Day weekend, 4th of July, Boston Pops, Labor Day weekend, Christmas stroll. Other festivals and holidays that may apply would include Film Festival, Comedy, Book, and Thanksgiving. Next slide, please. Here we have warm operations, which is going to be the moderately restrictive of our intended uses. This is going to entail a strict coordination between our line service and FBO personnel. Warm ops will allow the relief from our main apron during high demand times. Our X1 FBO software will allow staff the ability to track and monitor aircraft departure dates and times, thus allowing the ability for our line service staff and our FBO staff to coordinate and anticipate the needs of our crew members and our passengers, ultimately ending in a higher level of customer service. The aircraft in this on the new ramp during our warm operations will be towed into parking position for short-term storage, or RON, which is our remain overnight. They will be towed out of the parking position to a taxi out position for a taxi and takeoff operation, or towed and back to our main apron so the crew can perform the pre-flight checks, any servicing, and preparing cabin for their boarding passengers. And again, APU usage will be monitored, restrictions and limitations will apply for warm operations. Next slide, please. Next up, we have our cold ops, which is going to be our most restrictive of the intended uses. This will allow for cold storage only, or aircraft that may have a mechanical difficulty. All aircraft will be towed on and off of the ramp. APU usage will be prohibited. Ground power units, however, will be permitted. A ground power unit is basically a small generator you would plug into the aircraft that would supply the power to the aircraft instead of having to run the APU. And then we would close that section of ramp from December 15th through May 15th, with the exception of any VIP special events, anything that may pop up last minute. Next slide, please. Here we have our mixed or combined operations, or half and half, however we want to say it. Basically, the plan would be to cut the apron in half. Utilize the southwest portion for cold or warm operations, while the northeast portion could be utilized as a hot or warm operation. Ultimately allowing for safer, more efficient movement of our aircraft. This will greatly reduce or even eliminate the need to close the movement areas, as Noah had mentioned earlier, rump areas and runways for aircraft parking. And final slide, please. And finally, we have the VIP movements. So this apron could be utilized for VIP movements such as presidential, governors, senators, foreign dignitaries, candidates, and their support missions or their security requirements as they visit our island. And that's all I have for our ramp management and monitoring plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Preston. Hi, everyone. So, well, Preston just did a great job going over some of the operational plans for the ramp extension and expansion. I'm going to go over some of the noise plans and the emissions plans because those are top of mind, I'm sure, for everyone here. I wanted to break down my section of the presentation into 4 pretty distinct categories. Action the airport is taking to manage noise actively on the ground, to manage noise more broadly, to monitor noise, and to look ahead. So 2 of the primary ways that we're actively managing noise on the ground include limiting APU runtime and directing aircraft to park with their engines facing away from the residential homes along Monahans. The APU runtime is a nuanced issue. We limit it to 15 minutes, and that's the standard. So those yellow APU signs are posted all over the ramp. They're posted in the pilot's lounge. They're posted anywhere we can get PICs to see them. But in some cases, it simply won't be possible or safe to enforce this runtime. Noah alluded to evolving aircraft, and with technical and FAA safety requirements changing, some aircrafts now require 50 minutes or more to run up, and that is the FAA requirement. So it's important to recognize that we're doing everything we can to keep APU use to a minimum, because excessive use does create noise disruptions as well as air pollution, but APUs are also important for pilots for safety checks and to keep the cabin comfortable. In all cases, though, we will have staff on the ground communicating with the pilots and logging all exceedances in our APU internal log. You can go to the next slide, please. In a much more broad sense, because in any challenge, you need to approach it on the ground and broadly. We're trying to promote and encourage compliance with our voluntary noise abatement guidelines. And one of the primary ways that we're doing that is through the use of our suggested flight path corridors. So this image to the left shows some of the voluntary and suggested flight corridors that we are encouraging pilots and aircraft to use at all times when they are under VFR guidance, which is visual flight rules, which means they are in control of their flight map and they are able to choose how to approach the airport. When they're under IFR, which more and more flights are nowadays, that's instrument flight rules, that's a process that is guided solely by the FAA. And so that is when you might see planes coming over residential neighborhoods, or someone in town might say, hey, I was eating my juice bar ice cream and I saw a plane. Those would be IFR flights. And so unfortunately, there's nothing we can do with that, but we are trying to shape the narrative of VFR to be as minimal as possible with noise and emissions. Some of the other ways that we're doing that here are conducting monthly flight audits to determine adherence, and that includes analyzing 20 randomized hours a month VFR for compliance, as well as conducting thorough investigations into every noise complaint received. And in both cases, it includes following up with the PICs in violation of the guidelines. Next slide, please. So those are some of the ways that we manage noise, but it's a 2-pronged process and also monitoring the noise. So in addition to those compliance monitoring and following up with pilots and the APU logs, we're also really excited to install 2 noise monitoring terminals. They'll be located near our ARF building, our emergency response building on our current ramp, as well as in the center point of the new South Ramp expansion. They will be 2 permanent noise monitoring terminals, NMTs as we call them, and they will be really helpful in monitoring noise volume so that we can work on our noise abatement efforts. Next slide, please. And looking at some of the results of our managing and monitoring processes over the years, it's pretty clear that it's working. And so while it might not always feel that way, well, the engines, it might appear, are getting louder and closer. in general, it's working. So when we're looking at a DNL, which stands for a day to night average sound level, which is a metric used to measure the average sound level over a 24-hour period, that has actually decreased over the years. This image is a DNL contour map, and it shows from the years 1986, 94, 2004, 2007, and 2013, how the area of DNL, the DNL footprint has continued to shrink over those years. The 65 DNL is what the FAA has determined to be a significant threshold of significant noise exposure. And it's calculated by averaging the sound levels measured during the day and night periods, with a 10 decibel penalty added to all night measurements to account for the increased sensitivity of human hearing and rest during that time. It's also estimated using this DNL reference and decimal levels that based on a 2020 study internally at the airport, after the berm is installed on a decimal level, noise will decrease 3 to 4 decibels for residences behind the berm, which is a pretty cool fact. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Cameron. Boyana, could you admit a cell phone ending in 0478 if they're in the waiting room?
I just see the iPhone. Probably that's it. I don't have nobody else in the waiting room.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm really proud of where the airport's been. Again, I'm pretty new to the airport, and so I might have that recency bias. But even with our success, we know that we can always learn, grow, and improve, especially when it comes to noise abatement policies. So looking forward, we're in the brainstorming phase, and Noah alluded to some of the items that we're considering moving forward, but one that I'm pretty excited about is establishing a program that blends human intelligence and technological monitoring to determine APU runtime for each individual aircraft on the ramp. And hopefully we would be able to do that in a more efficient and accurate way. That would include utilizing information from the new noise monitoring terminals, as well as staff on the ground. We are also actively considering incentivizing stricter adherence to our fly-friendly noise abatement guidelines, and that might include a priority operator program, a preferred operator program, to incentivize further adherence to these. I also wanted to mention, and you could go to the next slide, please.
And sorry, one more admins. Boyana, if there is an Emily Schlick, she should be showing by name. Could you please admit her?
I don't see nobody in the waiting room right now. But if I see her, I'll let her in.
Okay, thank you.
So we've gone over noise. I wanted to talk about emissions, because the airport's really excited to be working with HMMH as an emissions consultant for this expansion project. And I wanted to take a minute to share some of their methodology and analysis as we begin to look forward. We've sent over all of our flight arrivals and departures for the month of July. They're using that data as well as historical weather data to generate emissions dispersion weather files, utilizing the EPA AirMod meteorological processors. They're going to set up airfield operations in the AEDT, which stands for the FAA's Aviation Environmental Design Tool, to model the current conditions and the proposed expansion. They're inputting that processed data and updated airfield layout into the model, and then they are estimating the emissions concentrations at nearby locations as well. So that's the methodology that shapes their process. And then looking into the analysis portion, you can go to the next slide, please. They ultimately want to quantify emissions dispersion in the platform at nearby receptor locations for the existing and the proposed South Apron expansion, and compare the change in emission from the two locations. They will prepare graphics and tables showing the modeling results, and we will be happy to share all of that, because emissions, it's really important that we try to keep it down. As the environmental coordinator, it's really important to me that we minimize emission as much as possible. And while the FAA is the one inspecting and regulating aircraft engines, we can do everything we can here at the airport on the ground. And that is a goal of mine that I take very seriously. And with that, I'll pass it along to Rich Lasding for some of the engineering details. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Cameron. Good afternoon, everyone. So what I'd like to do is go over the project in an overview and access and sort of describe where we are today and how the project is going to get built and ultimately what it will look like. So the first picture is a picture of the entire airport. It shows the new project to the left side with the parking apron and the berm in green behind it. And the rest of the details show some airport stockpiles of where there are existing piles of material that will ultimately go in the berm. On the upper right, there's the environmental mitigation area, and down yes, thank you. Down in the left corner along along the ocean, that we're going to replace some perimeter fence. The rest of the drawing shows truck routes on how construction vehicles would get to the airport from various places. This is important for a couple of reasons. I think one, most people know that there's some activity going on at the project now today, and it's important to distinguish that it's not construction. As everybody and Nantucket knows, you're an island, and it's a significant effort to mobilize out to the island. So the contractor is taking the next couple of months really just to bring material and stockpile it at the airport. That does a couple things. One, it allows the contractor to get a head start on bringing this material to the airport. And two, it keeps them from mobilizing this material during the busier seasons on the island, when the island and all the barges and ferries are busy with tourists and residents. So that's what's going on right now. And then, as I said, the arrows and dash lines represent some various trucking paths. The most important maybe part of this will be the trucking path that's shown from the Bunker Road area, which is the industrial campus of the airport. And during the later stages of the project, the apron will be being paved, and the paving will be constructed at Victor Brandon's plant, which is in Bunker Road. So these roadway paths will show the truck route from Victor's plant through the local streets to the airport. And as we get schedules from the contractor, we will have better ideas of when that will occur and what days of the week and times of this project that will occur. Next slide, please. So this slide here shows the project, and it's being constructed in 8 or 9 distinct phases. And that's shown in the various little circles and colors on the drawing. So phase 1 will be ultimately to construct the new drainage system. A couple reasons why. The existing ramp at the airport is all collected into a series of underground catch basins, and it is outletted into the area where the berm is going to go in the future. That's where it infiltrates into the ground today, and it has since it was built. So in order to build the berm, we need to move the drainage system. So the first item will be to move the drainage system. And then after that is moved, the contractor can start removing the trees and regrading the ground and constructing the berm. And then a series of phases to construct the actual parking apron. These have to do with coordination of the airport and how the airport operates. Phases 2A, 2C, and 2D, it could impact aircraft usage on the nearby taxiways. So those are being performed separately in smaller phases with the airport's coordination to lessen the impact of the airport. And then 2B is the main apron, which is the bulk of the project. This project is 150 days of total time. It's currently expected to start construction around the beginning of March. 150 days is 5 months, so construction would go through approximately the end of July. The other phases shown on here are replacing some existing drainage structures, constructing some electrical duct banks, the mitigation area, as we talked about. And then in the lower left of the drawing, some perimeter fence that's having some failures due to salt spray and general aging. Next slide, please. So this is the ramp. Why did we pick the ramp this size? Earlier, Mr. Carberg had showed a picture of overflow parking at the airport. And one of the areas he showed was parking on the crosswind runway, which I think he's indicated had approximately 10 aircraft on it. So this ramp was sized specifically to remove those 10 aircraft. We have since sized it to meet the growing size of the aircraft that Mr. Carberg also identified. So it shows 4 Gulfstream 650s, 4 Global 6000s, and then all the way on the left is a remote parking position that could be utilized for one of the commercial service airlines if they needed to remotely park a plane, or if some of you remember earlier this year when the C-17 broke down. That would be a perfect place to park that and allow the existing ramp to remain for parking purposes. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the berm. The berm is going to be built between Monahans Road and the airport perimeter and the apron. It's approximately 15 feet high, and it is the same length as the apron. It is going to be constructed out of variety of soils on the airport. Most of the soils to build the berm are coming out of the actual area where the apron is going to be built. There are also piles of material at the airport that do have PFAS soil in them. So what we are going to do is, next slide, please. What we are going to do is encapsulate all of this material independent of what it is. So the ground or the bottom of this picture will be lined with a fabric, and then the material will be placed on top of the fabric. And then when the material is all done to the elevation shown, it'll be capped with another piece of fabric, and then there'll be soil and grass put over it. So that's what this berm looks like. In the middle, the sort of the candy cane looking object is a vent. This is soil. It has organics in it, so it has to be allowed to breathe. So this is a standard way to allow the material to breathe over time and allow the escaping of any of the organic compounds. Next slide, please. This shows the parking apron with the berm behind it, and the black and white dashed lines are drainage structures and culvert pipes. Couple of things to point out in this picture. The lower right corner talks about tying into the existing drainage system. So as I said, the airport's existing ramp drainage all went up to where the berm is going to go. So the very first thing we have to do is build the subsurface infiltration system that's all the way on the left, and then tie that into the existing system to alleviate the need for the water to go into where the berm is going. And then the upper right, many of you who live over near the airport are familiar with some flooding that occurs outside of gate 30B. So as part of this project, that area inside the fence at 30B is going to be regraded and some catch basins installed to further intercept and capture that water. All of this water, the existing water from the existing ramp and this ramp, will all go into this subsurface infiltration system, which is, next picture, please, which is a series of underground chambers. The picture on the right shows the size and number of chambers, and it will ultimately be buried under grass. It will not be seen from the surface, and it's designed for all of this drainage to infiltrate into the ground. And I think that is all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lasden. So a quick summary slide, and then we'll open it up for questions. I wanted to, again, recap that this is a federal and state sponsored project and with minority local share payment. It addresses existing safety and capacity issues at the airport. It's being driven by the fact that aircraft are larger across all categories. Our ramp operational strategies are really what's defining our purpose, and it's putting environmental and social accommodation at the forefront. And all of those above variables are informing our design plans and specifications, which is why we're ending with those design plans and specifications. As far as contact information, we're going to have a question and answer period. Cameron Woods, who spoke earlier, is also the airport's public information officer. Excuse me. Her email is listed below, cwoods@nantucketairport.com. If during the course of the project or later you have immediate questions where you need to speak to someone at the airport, 508-325-5300 is the general airport information line. The receptionist can direct your call to the most appropriate person to answer your question. And then to help us manage the question and answer session, just please raise your virtual hand or enter your name or question into the chat feature. Ask that you avoid back and forth conversations. It just makes it harder to pick up the questions. Or you can raise your physical hand and wave it with the camera on. We should be able to see that. I'll stop the share, which will help me see that. And if you can, please minimize unmuting and speaking until you're recognized, until you're on the phone only. And the only way you can get our attention is by speaking. And then follow-up questions are welcome by phone, email at any time.
I don't see a chat function. I don't see a function on my Zoom where I can ask a question. So perhaps you could just put me in your queue.
Okay. But I'll make you at least, Doug, I'll put you at least second.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so as the floor is open for questions or comments, if you can direct them to me, and then I'll direct them towards the rest of presentation staff. And Doug, why don't you start off? I don't see any raised hands. Oh, Doug, you're muted now.
Okay, is that better?
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation. I live at 27 Okinawa. I think I have a good idea where the ramp expansion is going to be. The one comment I would have, by the way, I do appreciate the fact that you're building a sound attenuation wall. I think that was, the one major fear that myself and a lot of my neighbors had. One suggestion that I would make, given the nature that sound is a wave, and it's actually the sound that's more concerning. So for us, landing and departing on 6 and an IFR day is almost insufferable for us. But if you're gonna layer in the south expansion of the ramp, that'll only make it worse. The suggestion I have is pretty straightforward. If you expand the berm south and turn it east, right? So you basically cradle the last aircraft with the berm, you're going to attenuate sound for probably about 50 houses. The way the berm looks like it's configured now is it terminates at the end of the ramp, thus allowing all that noise from the ramp, again, sound as a wave, to move around the berm and travel directly to the houses to the west. If you continue the berm literally 20 feet perhaps south and turn it slightly west, you don't impose on any of the ramp operations. It's short money for the project, and you end up saving about 50 houses an insufferable amount of noise, particularly when they land and depart on 6 on an IFR day.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to turn that over to Mr. Laston, the engineer, for a first answer at that. And I'm going to go ahead and for reference, I'm going to share slide 40. I think that might be helpful as a visual. Rich?
Yes, so I'm not seeing your slide, but okay, so is that the left side of this drawing? Is that what I'm understanding?
I'm on the south side of the drawing, which would be the left side of the drawing.
Yep.
So I believe for those who can see my screen that Doug, you're speaking about this area.
Yeah,
I am speaking, but yes, exactly.
We can absolutely look at that. We have to check some aviation surfaces off the runway. where the berm is constructed today, it did not violate any aviation surfaces as far as a height off the runway. There are standard aviation elevations and heights off the runway to protect aircraft and the airport in general. So we can absolutely take a look at that and see what we can do.
Great, that would be really appreciated. I think you may have my contact details, and I do know I'm speaking for a large part of the kind of Nobadir Basin that would be greatly impacted by continuing that berm south and turning it east. Thank you.
Yeah.
And for my portion, Doug, Rich alluded to an engineering answer related to airspace issues from a procedural one. It's something I'll probably report back to the airport commission, because if it is a viable project, it would require change in time and money, and I would need to get some further direction there.
Well, thank you. This is the first public meeting, so I really didn't have a chance to express this concern prior to you publishing the slides, but I do appreciate you looking into it.
Okay. Understood. Thank you. Any next questions from attendees?
Tom Quigley.
Oh, hello, Tom.
Yes, this is on stormwater drainage. I was wondering if the catch basins were designed to capture VOCs such as oil spills off the ramp or fuel spills and prevent them from getting into the aquifer.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Rich, again, that's a very engineering focused question. So I'd like for you to take it, and then I might ask for some follow-up on fuel spill protocol from Preston.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Quigley, yes, there is a standard insert into a catch basin that creates a weir across the top, and then there's a deep sump to catch things that settle out. So the catch basins are designed essentially to contain water in them all the time, and then the volatiles will float above the length of the insert, and then anything that's heavy will settle out to the bottom.
Thank you.
And I can that would be in the drawings that I believe you were referencing earlier today.
Yes, I did see that, but I wasn't certain that was the catch basin.
And I can through NOAA, I can reference the exact drawing that it's shown on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll follow up with that, and Preston, I don't think we need an answer from you.
This is Darla Stuckey. I have just a quick question. I also don't see a way to raise my hand, but does the fabric you talked about under the berm and on top of the berm actually catch and hold the PFAS? Is the point to leave it in there, or does it ever leach out through the fabric and get into the soil?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. I think, again, I'll refer to Mr. Laston.
That's okay. So the idea of the fabric on the bottom is to encapsulate the material. It will hold the PFAS. The fabric over this, so it's two things. The fabric over the top keeps rainwater off of the soil. So without the water moving the PFAS through the soil, the PFAS will not leave the fabric. So the PFAS will stay in the soil, encapsulated in this encapsulation system. It can't, so in other words, it won't leach out, if that's what you're asking. Because to leach out, it needs water to have it leach out. It doesn't leach out on its own.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry for my
No, that's okay.
lack of knowledge. Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
I'd offer at this point, I think it's working well if people want to speak freely with their questions.
No, I see Emma Ross.
Okay, Mrs. Ross.
What's actually Adam?
Mhm.
Husband.
Mr. Ross.
Well, anyway, I was just wondering what light pollution might be involved with this project. And I'm also concerned we're right at the end of the berm. And as Doug mentioned, if that sound is a wave, we're going to get it right in the front door. So I'm really seconding his proposal to get that berm turned around to kind of keep the sound pushed towards the east. But first question was the light pollution.
Okay. Thank you. The light pollution question is a very good one, and I'll also turn that one back to Mr. Laston. And on the berm extension, sound as wave propagation, I want to let you know I'm hearing that loud and clear, and that's something we will give a very deep look at. So, Rich,
So-
let me know if there's a slide you would want me to share as well.
No, so the light, we took a hard look at lighting. So lighting is challenging in that there are FAA requirements on how to light the pavement. And there is also on the island a dark skies initiative. And the Dark Skies Initiative uses the acronym BUG, B-U-G, which is backlight, uplight, and glare. So in the design and through the submittal process for the contractor, we are working to make sure we comply with the backlight, uplight, and glare, trying to force the light out onto the ramp, which is where the ground personnel need it. The light is there as a safety function for ground personnel to walk around and see what they're doing and not get hit by either a vehicle or a plane. And then in addition to that, the airport has decided to control these lights so that they will only be on when planes are entering and exiting and being prepared for takeoff. Otherwise, the lights will be turned off. No, I hope I didn't speak out of line. So, and then the lights are, I will get you at the height of the pole, but I don't believe the height of the pole is taller than the berm.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'll just pile further on. Rich did a pretty good job answering that question. We did everything we could to keep these poles lower than the berm, individually managed, and managed in a way where they are off for most of the time. And looking forward to our existing high mast lights on the south ramp between the ARP station and the end of our ramp. We're going to take what we learned from this, and we're going to hopefully be able to design those to a lower, more dark skies compliant configuration as well. But we understand we understand that desire from the community, and we're doing everything we can in that regard.
You guys mind if I ask one more question?
Of course.
Okay, great, thanks. This is more of a long-range question, but getting back to my point about the proximity of noise on the south ramp, especially when they're landing and departing on 6. What is the plan for runway? Is it 15, the intersecting runway at the north? Like, if you guys developed, is it runway 1 and 15? Correct me. It's. I think you know what runway I'm talking about. If you developed that runway and you pushed traffic up there, a lot of what you'd be, you'd relieve a lot of noise from the southwest portion of the island. I just want to know what the thought is or what the plan is for that runway.
Okay, good question. I love talking about runway configuration and air traffic, so I will take that one, and I'll ask staff to speak up if they think I missed anything. But I'm gonna share a graphic just to help orient some folks with our runway configuration. Okay, so I'm using Mr. Lasden's construction phasing figure. This is runway 624. It's runway 6 when you're taking off from the beach and going to the northeast. It's runway 24 when you're landing over Alter Rock and taxiing towards the beach. This is our crosswind runway, runway 1533. It's runway 33 when you're taking off over town, and runway 15 when you're landing, coming from town. My experience has been over the last decade that as the air taxi fleet has declined, we have fewer Cessna 402s, Navajos Caravans, we have more JetBlue E190s, American E175s, Gulfstream 5s, 6s, and 7s. These are big demanding aircraft and they demand the longer runway. When they're operating in the summer, which happens to be the predominant the heavy traffic period, they drive the runway configuration. So they drive towards a very heavy runway 624 usage. The ability of the airport and air traffic to set a runway 1533 configuration to accommodate these larger and heavier aircraft is limited. It's also limited by the predominant wind configuration. It isn't an accident that runway 624 is configured in this direction. The predominant winds in the summer during the majority of our aircraft operations are from the southwest at that 240-degree orientation. So even if we had the desire to, I can't think of a better word than force, but force aircraft operations on 1533, it would be inappropriate for the wind. FAA air traffic would probably still set the runway configuration to use runway 24. Preston or Cameron, is there anything operationally you wanted to clarify? Or
I would just add, Noah, that the wind plays a role for anyone who's not aware, because planes, all aircraft aim to take off and land into the wind at all time to minimize speed needed. And so that's why the wind plays a role in that.
One other thing I think would be good to add is the aircraft have to operate, within a certain envelope, and if they have a crosswind component that is outside of that envelope, then it's a no-go for sure.
That's a lot of technical jargon. Any follow-ups from any of that we can help clarify?
No, Tom Quigley again, another quick question.
Yes, Tom.
For those that may not have heard, could you tell us about your noise monitoring devices you plan to put in and around the airport in order to establish your noise envelope? Thank you.
Of course. Cameron, I will push that question to you.
I'm hoping to pull up a figure right here. Let's see. One moment, please. Okay, I'm not able to find it right now, but Tom, I will follow up with you and send out the specific NMTs that we're installing. They are intended for aircraft and airport use, and so the function of them really is to account for all operational sound, primarily including APU and GPU use. That the one downside of it, in my opinion, is that the NMTs aren't able to distinguish between individual aircraft use. And so when we're trying to determine which aircraft is producing the most noise, if someone calls and says, hey, I'm hearing a lot of noise, we're able to get someone out there and use human intelligence, but the NMTs themselves won't be able to determine which aircraft it is. And so I think that's the one downside. But as for the specifics of the noise monitoring terminals, I'll be able to get those specs over to you.
Okay, that's fine. I know that you're going to have them, and I think you're trying to develop a noise envelope around the airport, so we know where the 65 decibel level is. And that was basically for people who haven't heard this before. I have. Thank you. And I think you guys have done a wonderful job with this. Even though we had a rough start, it was a good meeting, and I thank you for doing it, Noah.
Thank you, Tom. So I'm going to continue to hold this open. I am fine with silence if it takes a little bit of time for someone to realize a question that they hadn't thought to ask. Now, please speak at will. I'll put in the plug while people are thinking that we do want to hear from you, even if you don't have any questions that came to mind at this point. We are going to put out this second presentation as it was recorded. And we do want to continue to hear from you on your questions and concerns. They don't necessarily have to be on this project. If you have other broad ranging, how does the airport operate? Can I come by sometime and get a tour? I'm going to have a nephew visit and they'd love to get closer to some of the aircraft. These are things we'd be happy to do. You know, please reach out and we'll do everything we can to answer your question in the best way that we can.
I'd also add that, you might not have a question right now. If another comes up, we have an Airport South Ramp expansion page where we have included the plans for the project, and we will be including any further information that pops up. So please check that regularly if you're interested in the continuation of the project.
I'm interested in the berm as well, more affecting the area, which is not designed on the presentation, but going more, I guess it would be northeast towards Skyline and Evergreen. So it's not necessarily where the new construction will be, but it's where the jets are existing right now. The noise I've gotten used to, but the smell is so bad when it's an east wind that we can hardly go outside and we can't open the windows. So it's more from the breathing than it is from the noise, even though the noise would be nice to be curbed.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Layden. Cameron, do you have anything?
Yeah. It's a great question, and if it were up to me, I think we'd try to put a berm around the entire airport. We are limited by funding and by a few other elements. But regarding the smell, I've noticed it too, and unfortunately, especially in the summertime when the wind is blowing, like Noah mentioned, we have a lot of congestion on the current terminal, and so that leads to an increased amount of aircraft taxiing and waiting to take off. And when you have a plume of scent in the air, that will tend to follow the wind. But my hope, especially with this new expansion project, is that when you're able to disperse the aircraft and you're able to allow them to turn off engines in a much faster time frame than they would if they were taxiing in that congested area, hopefully that will limit the smell and the noise up into the Evergreen area as well, or Everly, I'm sorry.
Noah, Tom Sadlowski. I just want to mention to the people who are looking for the link on the airport website. It's kind of hard to find, but if you have kept the email that the Surfside Association forwarded, which was Noah's email, there's a direct link on that. So you might want to get to that and save that, because it's going through the town website, I found it, I couldn't find it. And then I went to the email and there was a link. So that might help.
Yes, and please, you can email Cameron directly and we can, we would be happy to email these documents to you if you'd like us to print out a copy. We'll make half-size plans available. And I do recognize one thing we'd like to do with our website going forward is have better project-specific pages. We live in a time, I think there's much more community interest, and the airport hasn't traditionally had project-specific pages to easily navigate and find plans, specs, presentations like this. But yes, we would love, it's not a great page, it's a layer down, but we would love this to be available and accessible, and we'll do what we can to make that happen. Bear with me, I'm just visually making the rounds through our attendees. Well, if there are no more questions, I'm slowly going to say a few words, and if no one else jumps up with a question, I wanted to thank everybody for attending. And again, I apologize for the hack or the bombing incident earlier. That is ultimately my fault, and I take responsibility and apologize for it. And I hope to hear from some of you throughout the project. I'm hoping for an absolutely perfect implementation and construction season. If that's not the case, please let us know, and we will do everything we can to address or mitigate the situation that's presenting itself. I'd also like to thank Preston Harriman, Cameron Woods, and Rich Lasden for their part in the presentation, and Tom Sadlowski for helping us get the distribution for this meeting link out. So thank you, everybody, for your time and for your patience. I'll hang around for a couple more minutes. I have 5:29 now. I'll hang out until 5:31 if there are any more questions. If not, I'll close down the meeting then. So thank you. Mr. Creed, any questions from the media?
No, one thing I was going to ask you is there a way I can get the pictures that are on the slides, like electronically?
Send me a text or an email referencing the slide numbers, and I'll get you the base document, because otherwise it'll take me an extra few hours to get it posted publicly.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine. All right. Thank you.
You bet.